Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Fantasy Talk. I'm Ryan with Sports Stuff Hub, and in this edition, we're going to be covering running backs to target for your fantasy playoffs. We've already covered wide receivers, and we've covered quarterbacks. You can check those out on our website, sportsstuffhub.com, as well as our Facebook page. Just search Sports Stuff Hub, which also, those two are linked to our YouTube channel where all of our videos are posted. So we're going to be covering running backs, like I said. We're hitting the playoffs here now, week 15 through 17. Most standard formats with a 10-team league run 15 through 17. We've got 14 weeks behind us, so we're going to jump into this. Our first running back that I would say to target is going to be TJ Yeldon, running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know he was injured last weekend against Indianapolis. Denard Robinson filled in nicely for him. Anything that I say for TJ Yeldon applies to Denard Robinson if TJ Yeldon is unable to play this weekend. As of this morning, everything I read said that TJ Yeldon, at worst case scenario, would only miss this weekend and he should be back for week 16 and week 17. If that's the case, may not be a bad idea to pick up Denard Robinson as a handcuff if you wanted to go after TJ Yeldon. So let's get started on this. First game for TJ Yeldon, or for let me just refer to it as Jacksonville in the fantasy playoffs, is going to be Atlanta. Now, Atlanta is ranked number 18 in yards allowed on the ground this year. And when I refer to everything, we're talking about the most yards allowed. So Atlanta ranked number 18, allowing 105.5 yards per game. They've also allowed 17 rushing touchdowns on the ground, the second most in the NFL behind Detroit. Not many teams allowing that kind of progress on the ground. So Atlanta's going to be should be an easy game for either Yeldon or Denard to run the ball against. You can almost guarantee them a touchdown just based off of the odds alone. So the Jacksonville running back group, not a bad one to pick up if they're still available. If not, maybe even trade for them. Week 16 of the regular season and second round of your playoffs, Jacksonville travels to New Orleans. New Orleans is the worst defense in the NFL. They're ranked in the bottom 4 in passing, and they are the worst in running. So, averaging 136 yards allowed on the ground and 10 touchdowns. A little bit soft on the touchdowns compared to how many yards they're giving up, but 136 yards on the ground, that's just ridiculous for an NFL team to allow that. So, if TJ Yeldon is back by that point, start him with confidence. Denard Robinson, start him with confidence. Whichever one is playing that game, I would say let them run against New Orleans. Play them. They could help you win your matchup, get you into your championship week. That being said, Jacksonville travels to Houston for championship fantasy weekend, week 17 of the NFL. Houston is the 14th ranked run defense for yards allowed, and that's at 114 yards per game. They've only given up, again, 10 touchdowns, just like New Orleans, with a little bit less yardage. But Houston's been playing a little bit better the last few weeks. I would still probably say TJ Yeldon, not a bad option. Especially if J.J. Watt still is wearing that cast, which more than likely he will, it's going to affect his tackling ability because he can't tackle with that hand. So, TJ Yeldon or Denard Robinson, not a bad option, depending on who's starting. I would say go with them. Our next running back that I'd like to cover, not really so much a surprise on this one, more of a waiver wire gem. If you didn't pick him up as of this morning, which most leagues, the waiver wires go active Wednesday morning, more than likely he's not available, but maybe you could even squeeze a trade on this one. Brandon Bolden, New England. Now that LeGarrette Blount placed on IR, Brandon Bolden's going to be the starting running back for first and second downs. James White's going to be the passing guy, as you've seen in the past. But the nice thing about Bolden is he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So it's going to open up the passing game for him as well. He's got a couple of soft matchups, but he does have one bad matchup in Week 16. But he starts off playing Tennessee at home, which Tennessee is the 16th ranked run defense, allowing 111 yards per game. And they've given up, again, another 10 touchdowns. In 14 games, 10 touchdowns, about league average from what I'm seeing. Still, putting in Brandon Bolden starting against Tennessee, not a bad option. He'll probably get you a touchdown. More than likely, it'll be a receiving touchdown just because New England hasn't scored a ton on the ground. But Bolden is also a threat to catch the ball out of the backfield. Week 16, again, like I said, is his worst matchup. They're on the road at the Jets. This could be a big game for the Jets. The Jets have to win this game in order to stay on pace to make the playoffs, because obviously New England's not going to give up their position, but they're playing for a wild card spot. New York Jets defense has been pretty stout this year. They are the number one run defense in the NFL, allowing 78.9 yards per game and only 2 touchdowns on the ground. 2 touchdowns in 14 games on the ground. That's amazing. That's awesome. We're talking some of the best defenses in NFL history were in that same category. 78.9 yards per game on the ground. I don't expect Brandon Bolden to have a very good game against them that week. So he might be an option that you sit on that week, unless the Jets fall on their faces. I just don't see it happening this time. So maybe find somebody else for week 16. Now, his strong matchup comes back in week 17, playing the Miami Dolphins, third worst run defense in the NFL, again averaging over 130 yards on the ground per game. They're 131.5, and they've given up only 9 touchdowns, though, compared to that. A little bit weighted difference because of the touchdown differential, but they've given up some long touchdowns in the air. That's one of the reasons why they haven't been allowing as many running touchdowns. But giving up 131 yards per game on the ground, favorable matchup again for Brandon Bolden. He may not score a touchdown, and if he does, it'll probably be through the air, actually, but he'll probably rack up 100-plus yards against Miami's defense. Miami will be out of the playoffs by that point. The only thing they're going to be looking to do is be spoiler for New England. I would expect New England to try to run the ball a lot, to try to ground the clock down, get it over with, get their guys off the field as quick as possible to avoid any injuries that could lag into the playoffs. But, like I said, Brandon Bolden should be a key role in that, so expect some good yardage out of him. I'm going to throw a fourth pick in this before I get to my best pick. I'm going to throw one more into here. A guy that more than likely not many people have caught wind of this, but the Seahawks released Juwan Harris after Thomas Rawls got injured. So you had Marshawn Lynch have surgery. He's done for the regular season. Rawls got injured halfway through last week's game, and he's out for the season, actually. So Juwan Harris filled in for him, and he did okay. They cut him, and then they signed Bryce Brown. Bryce Brown was on the practice squad. He hasn't been playing for the Seahawks this season on the active roster, so they signed him, and they cut Juwan Harris. Freddie Jackson's still going to be the third down guy, but Bryce Brown may be a good option for you to pick up just because of their matchups that they've got in weeks 15 and 16. They're playing Cleveland and St. Louis, which are two of the lower half run defenses in the NFL. Be good matchups for them. Week 17 against Arizona, on the other hand, is going to be a little bit of a difference maker. Arizona is the 5th best run defense in the NFL. So if you do happen to pick up Brandon Bolden, might not be a bad idea to try to also target Bryce Brown because of his week 16 to 17 flip-flop. You could potentially end up with some big numbers if you flop them against their bad defenses. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the guy that I think is going to have the best 3-game stretch in the NFL, and this might even be the best 3-game stretch out of anybody in the NFL, including the top running backs. Now, he's probably not really on anybody's waiver wires just because of how well he's done this season, which I had him pegged since the draft as having his resurgent season. Doug Martin, Tampa Bay running back. Dougie has fallen off the map in 2013 and 2014. His rookie year, stud, 1,500 yards, dozen touchdowns or whatever it was. He had a great rookie season. Then he just completely disappeared as far as fantasy relevance and stat relevance for that matter. Doug is back this year. He's got over 1,000 yards rushing. He's got, I want to say, 7 touchdowns or whatever it is. But Doug is running stronger, he's running harder, and he's got a team around him for once. He's got a quarterback, and he's got wide receivers for them to throw the ball to, so it's going to free up the running game a little bit. Doug Martin is playing a pretty good 3-game stretch coming forward here. This coming week, they're at St. Louis. St. Louis is the 11th worst run defense in the NFL. They're giving up 115 yards a game, 7 touchdowns on the ground. St. Louis, he should be able to run against. Expect 100 yards from him. My vote right now is that Doug Martin is going to average 100 yards over his next 3 games. I see no reason why anybody's going to stop him. St. Louis will probably let him rack up 100. They're averaging over 100 yards a game anyway, so he'll probably rack up 100 yards on the ground himself, potentially even a touchdown. Who knows? Week 16, they are at home against Chicago. Chicago is the 7th worst run defense. Again, only allowing 7 touchdowns, but they're averaging 125 yards given during a game. Every game, they're giving up an average of 125 yards on the ground. Again, Doug Martin, fantasy feast for him. He should be able to pick that, and he should be able to take their defense and just pull them apart, just making his cuts and just being the Doug Martin from 2012 and the Doug Martin from 2015. That's what Tampa Bay needs, and now that they can build around that, and they've got a quarterback and wide receivers to spread the field a little bit more so that people aren't stacking the box against him. Chicago should give it up for him. Week 17, people are doubting what I'm saying about this, but Week 17, Tampa Bay's at Carolina. Carolina may be one of the better run defenses in the NFL. They're ranked 4th best overall, only 84.5 yards per game giving up on the ground, but they've given up 8 touchdowns, which is more than the previous 2 teams that he's going to play. I would expect him to have a pretty good game against Carolina, especially considering Carolina's probably going to rest a lot of their guys for the 3rd, maybe 4th quarters. They're going to rest their guys for a little while at least. So if Carolina jumps out to a lead, they may pull some of their guys. I don't know. I haven't heard any of Rivera's comments about how important the undefeated season is to them. My view is that Rivera is going to look at it as, we need to win the game, we need to play the game, we need to make sure our guys don't get hurt. So I could see them, if they have a lead, pulling most of their guys midway through the 3rd or into the 4th quarter. The last time Tampa Bay played Carolina, this was Doug Martin's breakout game for the year. He started slow for the first 3 games, but Week 4 against Carolina, 20 attempts, 106 yards, a 5-yard per carry average, and a touchdown. In my league, it was 23.5 points. I know he had a couple receptions because I played in a PPR league, but he had a really good game. That was his breakout game, which started his comeback tour, is what I like to call it, of 3 straight 100-yard games. I would expect Doug Martin to close out the season just the way he started the first game with Carolina. If he can continue to run that way, Carolina won't be able to stop him, and I actually expect Carolina to give up some points. I would expect Carolina to still win the game. Whole different subject, but I expect Tampa Bay to at least put up 21 points on them, and Doug Martin's going to be a huge key for that. So this was our running back fantasy playoff targets. So like I said, Doug Martin, Brandon Bolden, either the Jacksonville running backs, preferably TJ Yeldon, because he'll probably be the one carrying the rock in 16 and 17. And then also the surprise one that I threw out there is Bryce Brown, just because of the release of Juwan Harris. So I would say target one of them. That should help you win your fantasy championship. This is Ryan with Sports Stuff Hub. Again, check us out online, sportsstuffhub.com. Check out our Facebook page, search Sports Stuff Hub, as well as our YouTube page. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page so you can get all the videos that we're doing and you can see what we're doing for next year.